Awesome. Go for it.
So good evening and welcome all. My name is Kate Meyer. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator here at the Women's Resource Center in Alamance County. We are an organization dedicated to empowering women to improve and enrich their lives. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about who we are, our programs and services, and our upcoming events. But today it is truly my pleasure to introduce entrepreneur and author Janet Ickes. Over a 20-year corporate career in accounting and payroll fields, Janet developed a broad knowledge and expertise in financial management and budgeting. Holding roles as financial manager, senior accountant, and AVP of Payroll in different industries provided vast opportunities to train, learn, and grow both professionally and personally. She now brings this expertise and wisdom to entrepreneurs and small business owners who want to build a solid financial foundation. Thank you for joining us, Janet.
Thank you so much. I am just so glad to be here. I just absolutely enjoy the opportunity. And Kate, it definitely is a pleasure. And I'm so blessed to have this opportunity. So thank you. And Sharice, thank you so much for joining us. You'll find I love to have communications and, feel free to jump in with questions as we're going. I like to just have a little bit of fun because sometimes when you talk about money, it kind of is a little quieter conversation. So we're going to have some fun with it, which is kind of where Hammy, that's our little blue pig that is sitting up there. That is his name. And Hammy has a mission, and his mission will be kind of revealed a little later on. But he's on a mission. But as Kate said, I've had a lot of years in corporate America. Grace of God, about 5 years ago, I got to walk away from corporate and got to kind of really dive into my small business, which was Mary Kay business, and then found that a lot of the entrepreneurs I was working with didn't know what they didn't know. But the problem was it was across the boards. It wasn't just entrepreneurs. It was a lot of folks were struggling, whether it was in business or in personal. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's where money doesn't spend itself. So where did it go was kind of born into was to say, okay, where did it go? Because too often it seems like we have no idea. So that's what we're going to talk about. How often is this the look? All of a sudden, the credit card bill comes in. All of a sudden, you go to look at the bank account and it's not quite what you thought it should have been. Things happen. This is not the look that we want. Although I'm going to guess if we're honest with ourselves, because I've been there too. I'm pretty good at managing money, but I've fallen into this little category once or twice. That's not my goal. So my goal is very simple when we were looking for it. I want you to have that type of a goal. So that when you're looking at these numbers and you're looking at your finances and you're trying to figure out where money is going and coming in from and all of that, here's the cool thing. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming that you look like this poor girl every time you even think about money. My goal is very simple. It is to make it that when you're looking at your numbers, it's just another part of the piece of the puzzle that's necessary to keep moving forward so that you can meet the goals that you want to do. And how do we do that? How in the world do we do that? Well, believe it or not, it's pretty simple. I'm going to encourage you to go back to the basics. We're going to take a step back. Most of us can handle 1 + 1 = 2. Now, some days, especially with, the sons, and sometimes it could be 4, but for the most part, 1 + 1 is going to equal 2. And it's the basics. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's think about it. Too often, when you start talking about money, the thought really can get like, I'm just not even sure what direction I want to go in. You write checks out, you run it through the bank, whatever you do, ACH it, whatever you're going, you just do with what you need to do. Because my guess is you're juggling a few hats. Somehow you're probably working and earning some income. In addition to that, you probably may or may not have kids or pets or some semblance of it, maybe even parents that you're taking care of. And all of a sudden, all of these hats are all affecting how you have to react and how you have to deal with things. So by the time it comes to managing money, that's probably last on a lot of people's totem poles. But I'm going to encourage you, and I'm going to kind of walk through some tips that I have found that maybe can encourage you to actually put a simple system in place. Because here's what I found. When I was writing the book, I got a chance to really look into some things. And I found that 2/3 of Americans struggle to have an emergency fund. What's an emergency fund? That's simply those unexpected expenses. How do you defray some of that cost? Because invariably, just like this morning, I kind of mentioned, I woke up, got into the shower and got partway through the shower and had no water pressure. Something's not right. So found out that there was a coupler that broke. And so basically a pipe broke on our well and water was flying everywhere. Things happen. Is it we had to get it fixed. So guess what? That's an extra expense that I was not exactly ready for this morning at 6 o'clock, just saying. But all too often, I'm going to bet you can relate. How often does something come up just like that? In addition to that, when I was researching it, 50% of Americans spend more than they make. Why? Probably because they're not sure what they're making, nor do they have any idea why or where their money is going. 50%. I don't like those stats. So I want to do something about it. Because the bottom line is, why does this happen? Why? Why does it? Because money doesn't spend itself. So if that's the case, what are we going to do? Okay, let's face facts. If you find yourself in this situation and you have absolutely no control on the money that's coming in and out of your bank account, what's going to happen? You're definitely going to spend more than you make, because without some boundaries and some controls in place, you have no idea. So you spend until it goes negative. A lot of times that happens, or you could. Often what I find happening is many of the folks I work with, the credit cards are maxed out. That's not a good thing either. In addition to that, if you're an entrepreneur, there's no money left to pay yourself. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. And really the bottom line is you're stressed. When you got to pay bills, you have no idea if the money is in the account to pay those bills, because you don't have a handle on money, but yet it doesn't spend itself. In addition to that, let's face facts. When the unexpected comes up, how bad do you have to scramble to cover those unexpected expenses? Do you have an emergency fund put back so that the parts to replace the well are available for you? What about if brakes go out in your car? What if one of the kids gets sick? How do you deal with the unexpected? If you don't have a handle, it's really hard to do. Okay, whether we like it or not, tax time is going to come really, really fast. I don't know about you. I feel like it just happened, but guess what? It's going to be coming here really soon. We are at the end of September. 9 months of 2021 are done. We have 3 months basically to wrap up 2021. And then we get to play with taxes. And whether we like it or not, and I don't know, I could always say up until last year that April 15th is going to come regardless. It was about as good as Christmas. Guaranteed the 25th of December was going to be Christmas. Okay, well, April, May 15th, we'll go with it depending on what the government decides. But still, the bottom line is you're going to have your tax reports ready to go. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to provide a report to your accountant so that you actually have the information? Or too often than not, what I find happening is you're scrambling to find all those receipts, shoving them in a shoebox and handing it and hoping that you have everything that you need. Too often, when you don't have control on that or a good system in place, tax time becomes a nightmare. And the bottom line is you end up stressed and overwhelmed. And when that is the case, your health is going to suffer. Your family is going to suffer, because I don't know about you, if I'm that stressed, I tend to be a little bit short in my responses to my child or the dogs or my husband. That's just me. I suspect you may have run into that situation occasionally. When you run and you try to juggle all the hats that as women, we typically have to juggle, it's just a reality. And I don't know about you, but when I get too stressed, I don't make the best decisions either. I find myself making really silly decisions, and I'm just saying that nicely, because when you're stressed, You're reacting. That's all you're doing. You're just constantly reacting. And there's no way that very often do you make good decisions when that's the case. Because in your mind, you're grabbing that hammer and you're taking care of screwing that into the piece of wood, or you're taking those wrench and you're actually pounding in that nail. Not sure about you. Now, if you ask my dad, who he was in his 90s, so he was, Great Depression area, he had a screwdriver that doubled as a hammer, a chisel, and several other things, if you asked. Is about this long. Now, in that case, this might work. But for most would agree. The wrong tool is being used. The wrong resources you're not using the resources to be effective. And that's what ends up happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that, because the bottom line is money doesn't spend itself. So what are we going to do about this? So my first thing for you is I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. I want you to be thinking about it. So here's the first thing I want you to ask. Where did your money go? Because if it's not in your account, we've got to go find it. We got to go find it. We got to go figure out where it's going, because it's not there. When we were actually getting out to the grocery stores, one day I had popped into the line and I just had like 3 items in my hand. So typical of me, what do? I look for the shortest line. I found one. I ran down to the end, jumped into the line, and realized very quickly why the line was so short. The lady in front of me had a cart that was brimming over with stuff. Oh boy. Well, so much for getting out pretty quick, because now all the other lines had filled up. So I might as well I got 2 choices. What I got? I can either stay here and deal with it, or I can get really grumpy and angry. What am I going to do? Oh, you know what? I might as well make a new friend. If you have not figured out, as we were talking a little bit, my family is like filled with dogs. I happened to notice that the lady in front of me had these 3 big dog bags. I can talk this language. So I just casually mentioned, oh, I noticed, what kind of dogs do you have? My brain, I'm thinking some big dogs. They got these 50-pound dog bags sitting there. She looked at me and she's like, oh, I have a Chihuahua. I don't know about you, but 3 big bags of dog food for a Chihuahua just wasn't quite what I was thinking. And I'm like trying to okay. I'm thinking to myself, okay, okay, we can do this. So I politely just smiled and said, oh, well, he must really like that dog food. I was even more speechless when her response came. Her response was very simple. Oh no, he likes the canned food, but the dry food was on sale. How often do we get caught up in the little squirrel moments? And all of a sudden it was on sale, so I'm going to take it. Oh, that's a good deal. I'm going to grab it now. How often have you found yourself in that situation? Maybe that explains where some of your money was going. And if we're truthful, let's face facts. I'm going to guess most of us have come into that situation once or twice. The good news is you can prepare for some of that. You can actually have a plan in place, novel concept. So you can have a little fun money to go get that item that was on sale. There are things that we can do. Another thing that happens, how often, especially nowadays, how often do you find that it's a little easy to order things online? The neighbor, I can't deal with it. I'm gonna have to go something else. Too often what ends up happening is boxes upon boxes upon boxes get delivered each and every day. Amazon, UPS, FedEx, the list goes on and on. Too often, all those boxes show up on the shelf. Do you need everything that's there? Maybe, maybe not. But it may contribute to understanding why over 50% of Americans spend more than they make. That easy button to order from Amazon is just a little too easy. So what can we do about it? What can we do? I want you to think about your money, and I want you to think about it like a house. But let's take it one further step. Let's put a strong foundation under that house. And you got a couple of choices. What are you going to build your foundation on? Sand or bricks or rock? One thing that the Bible shared with us is a little story about what happens, and depending on your choices, what the outcome will be. You can choose to build on rock or you can choose to build on sand. And depending on what that choice is, when the storms of life come, depends on how well that foundation substantiates the house that you have built, your finances and stuff. Because one thing is for sure, things are going to happen. The unexpected is going to happen. It's just inevitable. So what are you going to do? The cool thing is, if you have a foundation built on rock, it can withstand the weather and the chaos much better than if you've built on sand. Just something to think about. So, thinking about that, the second question I want you to ask yourself is, what am I going to do when? When what? When that unexpected happens. I put this picture in here because it's just a crazy story. That's Bear. That's our puppy. That's our 2-year-old. And we adopted him. He was 11 months when we got him. And we took him on the boat because I was trying to get him acclimated. I jumped in the water with the kids, didn't think twice about it. He's up there on the boat with, the rest of the crew that weren't crazy enough to jump in the water. And next thing I look up, and here comes Bear down over the back, walking on water. He had no idea that it wasn't solid ground because he had never been on water before. So he stepped right on off the boat and went to stand solidly on water. You can guess what happened. Not only did he make a really big splash, it scared him practically to death. So we get him hoisted up, water's flying everywhere. He starts finally doggy paddling, hallelujah, he had figured out how to swim. Goes around the boat, he's taken off. Okay, here we go. He's like, oh, Mom, you've come to save me because I'm trying to chase him to bring him back to the boat. So he climbs up on my shoulders. Now, I don't know about you, but an extra 80 pounds treading water, I was a lot more accomplished with that task 20 years ago. Not so much now. So we both about drowned. It was quite crazy. My husband and the rest of the crew are laughing hysterically. They found this really, really amusing. Not sure Bear did at all. Once I got him out of the water, it was a lot more funnier than as I'm spitting out water trying to go. But think about it. What are you going to do when? Are you going to be drowning because you're not prepared? Or are you going to figure it out, maybe spit and sputter a little bit, as I said, I had the extra 80 pounds on my shoulders, and be able to get him up there? And I actually had some support, thank you, Lord, as they were able to pull him and hoist him back on the boat. So sometimes you got to surround yourself with some support as well. So what are you going to do when the unexpected happens? Something to think about. So it's a question I want you to ask. So when it comes to money management, we got to sit here and we got to figure it out. We got to scratch our heads sometimes with all of this stuff out in front of us. So what can we do? Here's what I'm going to encourage you. Let's go with plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We may have a few more if necessary. Because what ends up happening is very often plan A, you might need B or C or D. So what in the world does that equate to? So let's take it back a step. So what's one of the first things you do? The first, plan A, set yourself aside an emergency fund. If you talk to Dave Ramsey, you kind of look at Dave Ramsey's teaching, he says, okay, start with $1,000. Get $1,000 set aside so that when that emergency happens, when the well goes crazy, the brakes go out, the transmission goes out, the washer goes out, you get the idea. You have something to help defray some of that cost. So get that emergency fund set up. In addition to that, get a system in place to make sure that you have a little bit of savings to work with. If you have something sitting there that is set aside, it is so much easier to deal with those unexpected. And yes, it is possible. But the thing is, you got to have a system in place. That's the bottom line. Maybe you're in a position where your income is up, down, up, down, up, down. When we were in Pennsylvania, I have always worked a salary job. So I got the same amount, whether I worked 40 hours or 80 hours, didn't really matter. I knew what my income was. My husband, on the other hand, drove coal truck. So if anybody is familiar with in the North, when you're driving coal truck, it's feast or famine. So we had months that we had great paychecks. We also had months that we had no paychecks. So being a newlywed couple, it was really helpful to have both paychecks if we wanted to meet our monthly bills. How do you do that when in summer months you do really well, in winter months you do really well, but in the opposites, you don't do so hot? What do? Well, what I did is I automatically set aside, I looked at, an idea. I actually talked to the previous owner of the house. I'm like, give me an idea of what the expenses are. Start somewhere, figure out kind of there. And I prepared and said, okay, well, if I've got to come up with a, 1,200, we're going to use simple numbers tonight, $1,200 for the year, when taxes come due, it's a lot easier for me to put aside $100 a month so that I can pay the tax bill. To me, that was common sense. That's not something that is sometimes realized. I know with my husband, they always, he's like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to pay this bill? I'm like, I already got the money back. One of those things to think about. If you think ahead and you start looking at things, it's much easier to come up with $100 than $1,200 in a month. Just a thought. So if there's a way that you can do that, maybe it's moving it to a separate account. That's perfectly fine. Move it over to a separate account so that when the bills come due, you just write the check out of that account. You can actually set yourself up for success. It does take a little planning and it does take a system in place, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So back again to starting. So what in the world do we do? And people laugh at me, tell me I'm crazy, and I am, and I'm good with that because I want you to actually schedule a weekly or a month and not or schedule a weekly and monthly appointment with yourself. Now, if you're married, add the spouse in there because they got to be part of this. Even if you're running the finances, you got to drag them in there and you got to, kind of work with them a little bit here because you both got to be on the same page. Because if you're going to be successful in your family, in your resources, and your money management of your household, you both got to be on the same page. It's really hard if that's not the case. Now, does that mean that maybe you're better at the numbers? That's great. Maybe they're better at the numbers. That's perfectly fine. But you got to come to a meeting of the minds. And you need to do that. Now, when I say weekly, I want you to set aside some time weekly to get the numbers in place. And monthly, I want you to look at them. That's the first step. Because if you're not willing to do that, you end up putting your head in the sand. And heads in the sands don't work. It really doesn't work. You can do it. That's perfectly fine. But I want you to be successful. And successful folks who are ready to manage their money appropriately are able to get their heads out of the sand. And that's what I want to do for you. I don't want you to play ostrich. I want you to actually have a simple plan in place so that you can manage this stuff and not go crazy. So what's step 2? I know this is the one that gets everybody and they're ready to beat me over the head because I'm going to tell you, I want you to track all of your income and expenses. And folks do not like when I tell them that because it is very, very overwhelming and it's challenging. And that's just part of it. So how do we do that? How in the world do we do that? Well, the good news is you got all kinds of choices. There is opportunities out there to meet everybody's needs, believe it or not. So what are some of those choices? It can be as simple as pen and paper. Believe it or not, this does work. For many people, that works well for them. Write it down. You have got to get some type of record keeping in place. So pen and paper, if that works, go for it. For other folks, you need to do some type of a spreadsheet type program. You got Microsoft Excel, you've got Google, you've got different options that are out there, all different price points, all different features and functions and things like that. But at least it takes some of the math out of it for you. Let the computer do the math. That's perfect. If you're using pen and paper, it's a little cumbersome, a little time consuming. If you're using a software, yes, you can make it a little quicker when it comes to doing the math. The only problem with that is you don't understand the formulas. You could be better off using pen and paper, depending. So it's one of those things that what is going to work? Or, hey, let's face facts. You can even do software such as QuickBooks, Quicken, all these different softwares that are out there that allow you to track your income and expenses. If you want to upgrade to like a software type thing, not only does it track it, but it gives you some reporting. There's all kinds of options. There's choices. Sometimes it's a combination of different things, but the bottom line is you need to make a choice and you need to figure out what is the best system. And you know what that is? Bear put it very well. It is the one you are going to use. That's the best system for you. I want to encourage you, find a good system that you're going to use so that you can begin tracking all of your income and expenses, because that is the only way to build a foundation out of rock so that your entire money management system will withstand whatever comes its way. All right, so looking at that, there we go. And step 3, we got to look at some reports. Now, I called it profit and loss report. That's the corporate brain talking. Bottom line is this. You've got to get a report that tracks income and summarizes the total. You've got to grab a report that tracks expenses and summarizes the total for the month. Which one's higher? That's all a profit and loss is. So did you have higher income or did you have higher expenses? Here's the good news. If you have higher income all the time, then you actually can make sure that you can start tracking some of things. If your expenses are too high and they're always outweighing your income, you got to make some changes one way or another. Because the bottom line is you have got to get this under control and figure out what you can do. So that's what we're trying to do. So why are we doing all this? We are going back to the basics. We are taking the time each week, each month at a minimum. I suggest doing it weekly because it's much easier. Get all those numbers in place, track it, so that at the end of the month, you can start looking at those totals. You can start looking at what's going on. Are you having higher income? Are you having higher expenses? Now you can start making educated decisions. You can make good decisions because you're not reacting as much. And part of those expenses, believe it or not, are going to be the emergency fund, are going to be savings, need to be things that you know about. Just like for us, I knew that we had to pay a very large bill. We had 3 oil tanks in Pennsylvania. I tried to fill up in the summer. When I first started, it started about $600 to fill it up. By the time we left 20 years later, it was a $2,400 bill. What did I do? I can guarantee I looked at the prior year's numbers and I kept increasing that number till I was taking $200 a month off of what I brought in and putting it aside so that we had heat in the winter. And I wasn't stressed out and overwhelmed when that $2,400 hit the mail. Well, back then it was mail. We actually got our checks out. A lot of things are electronic now, but you get the idea. So thinking about that and going from there. So that's what you're looking for. So I'm going to ask you another question, just out of curiosity's sake, because he's got another question on 3 little pigs. His question is this: what do you think fairy tale pigs can teach us about business or personal finances? And here's what my challenge to you is. I think it's everything. Why? So what are some of the financial lessons that you can learn from the 3 little pigs? So think about it. You have the 3 little pigs. Each one of them built their house from different material. So what'd they do? The first little pig built his out of straw. He pretty much took the easy way out because he wanted to go play and have some more fun. Well, here's what I'm going to challenge you. Taking the easy way out when it comes to managing money is most likely going to lead to some stress and frustration. What about pig number 2? Lesson number 2 is the guy that actually built his out of sticks. So what if you're using some tools and software? They're a great investment, but only if you understand the reports that they're producing. That's the ultimate goal. So whether you're using pen and paper, whether you're using a software, whether it's a spreadsheet or a full-blood software, make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand it. Or are you like the last pig who built his house out of brick? And where did the other two come? Because it is so worth it, the effort to know your numbers so that you can produce the necessary report so you can figure out what your goals are. So let me ask this. I was going to go into the chat and say, but Sheree, it's only us talking here. So when you're talking about money management, have you ever dealt with a budget? Yeah, I usually try to get some chat. Would you be willing to have a little conversation with me?
Sure.
Awesome. So when you're doing it, do you have a system in place that you're currently using?
Yes, I use a Google spreadsheet.
Perfect. What do you find that's useful for you by, instead of pen and paper, you're going to a Google spreadsheet?
Yes.
So do you find the math making it much simpler? So do you have different, so you can set it up and grab it? Do you track everything?
Yes, and I find it easier because I can duplicate the tab since my bills are monthly.
Perfect. And that is a great point. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that makes things easier. Is it not worth the effort? So I'm going to guess then at the end of the month, you have a pretty good idea and pretty good handle where your money's going. Is that a fair statement? Pretty much?
Yes, between that and then I primarily use debit cards, so seeing the actual transactions, yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Kate, do you mind jumping in here as well and kind of sharing what some of your thoughts are on that?
Sure, I'll be happy to. You know me, I'm analog. I like my pen and paper.
Pen and paper.
So that does help. My problem is probably more so the consistency piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I'm going to steal your idea there of making an appointment with myself to make sure everything's logged like once a week.
And that's perfect. And there's something else that I have and something that I've used. Those little crazy expandable folders are a great little investment. They cost a whole whopping like $3 or $4, if that. They used to be cheaper. They might be $5 or $6 now. But those expandable folders, I usually got a pockets of 13. And the way I set mine up, January, I'd start in the back. I just kind of come forward. It's the corporate brain. January through December. And that very front folder, of course, was technically empty. So what I did to make my life easier, I'd go ahead and I'd have that expense. I'd bring that receipt. As soon as I got home, I dropped the receipt in the front of that folder. Then at the end of the week, I knew that it was all the front folder that I needed to deal with. So now they were all in one place. I could simply grab them. At the end of the week, hopefully I didn't have, 15,000 of them. I only had maybe 15. And it was much easier at the end of the week to just jot that into the pen and paper, into Google Sheets, whatever works for you, because you're going to use it that way. And then you just simply file them in the respective month. Now you've got everything organized. So should the case ever happen, you actually could just hand the folder to the accountant and go from there. Something to think about. And I'm going to sneeze, but that's okay as we're going. So just some things to think about and some little lessons from there. So that's kind of where, talking about some of the money doesn't spend itself. And that's where the book was coming from. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do here, but I do some additional training. So I'm just going to say, if anybody's welcome to on Wednesdays at 11:30, you're welcome to join Lunch and Learns just very, very quickly. Because one thing I've learned is alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And that is something that I really want to congratulate the Women's Resource Center with, because they are so focused on empowering women. It is amazing. And I have just been blessed to be able to work with since the 5 years that I have been down here, I've actually connected with the Women's Resource Center. And it's just amazing how that whole spirit is there. And I think this quote that I use very often fits right into what they do, that together we can accomplish so much more. So what are some things that we can accomplish? If we're willing to go ahead and put all of this in place, and we're willing to track all this information and look at these numbers, what are we going to do? We're actually then able to start throwing darts towards our financial goal dartboard. We are able to actually make some bullseyes. We can do it because we know what our numbers are. We have figured it out. Now, if we've chosen to get a little lax on that and sometimes just not there, we can still throw the darts. That's perfectly fine. But all too often, you're throwing them blindfolded. And worse yet, if you're not tracking this information and taking the time to look at it and understand what it's telling you, you very well may be throwing those darts at a dartboard that's behind you. That's not what we want to do. That's not the direction that we want to go. We want to make sure we have the tools in place so that we have a good understanding and control over where our money's going. Because the bottom line is money doesn't spend itself. And it's our choice, whether we like it or not. It is definitely our choice. But here's another cool thing. As we're talking about and we're getting these numbers put together, if you start comparing them month to month, now what are you doing? You're starting to be able to identify trends. You're able to start seeing where maybe more money's coming in this month, less money's going out, and you can start really figuring out. So instead of having these crazy peaks and valleys and going crazy at certain times and having lots of extra money at other times, you actually can even a lot of that out, just like I was sharing with taking care of that lovely oil bill that was coming in. Or let's think about it. What about your insurance? That's often one time a year of an expense, or 6 months, depending on what you're paying. There's usually a discount to pay in a little bit bigger chunk as well. So if I plan ahead, I get to pay less. Not a bad little deal. I'd rather keep the money in my pocket versus giving it to them, if at all possible. And a lot of times that is. And by willing to take that time and being willing to track all of this information, not only can you identify trends, but you can also identify your spending habits. Because let's face facts, our habits will come back and get us. But the cool thing about a habit is you can create new ones. And the choice is yours. Are you a spender? Are you a saver? And depending on how you answer that, very often depends on how you react to things. And even better yet, typically, most households are made up of a spender and a saver because opposites attract. So this makes this really fun, which makes it even more important when you're having that monthly meeting of the minds that you find a way to make sure in general that you're both are on the same page. Because in order to maximize things and to be successful, you got to identify the habits, know what you're working with, and maybe that determines exactly, maybe you got to figure out how to give some fun money and put it out there that you just don't question. If you got a spender and they just spend, well, maybe you give them, quote unquote, the little envelope that says, here's your fun money. When it's done, you're done. And you just don't ask. You just don't ask because that's what they need to do. And that's okay. Other folks are big time savers and they just, they don't want to spend anything and they really can't enjoy. So you've just got to find the system that works. And very often, if you've got someone that just wants to spend, listen to them. Let them, keep it brief and let them know what's going on. Or maybe you're totally a saver, same kind of a deal. Listen, put it out there on the table, write it down. And now you can start moving towards those goals. And you can be realistic about things. And you can start to work together as a team. And that's really, really important. So that's what these reports are going to help you to do. So you get to see what's going on. And of course, that system, I'm going to take it one further step. Kind of consider it the bonus. I want to encourage you to create a budget. Now, if you ask me, I'm going to tell you a budget is a 4-letter word. So this is when I typically ask folks to throw it in the chat. What word do you think that is? Christy or Kate? Yeah, Kate, you pronounce Sharia. She knows because she's heard this before. Because I use this very often when I'm doing some. Now you can tell Sharia in a minute. Do you have any idea, Sharia, what the 4-letter word may be?
Plan.
Awesome. I am so proud of you. That is awesome. Very rarely does that ever come up the first time around. I get some really good words though. It's really fun when you have a group of people because I get some really good words, some of which need to have bleeps in them, but that's okay. That's okay. The budget doesn't need to be complicated because it's simply a system. And it's simply, as Sharia said, it's simply a plan. A plan so that you know what's going on. And I love Dave Ramsey's quote, so I always throw it in here. The budget is simply telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. So how do you do it? You start with what you know. Figure out what actually happened, compare the two, and adjust. That's it in a nutshell. So you take and kind of look at last year. You start somewhere. Take your bank statements from last month. If that's where you're going to start, so be it. That gives you an idea of what you spent that month. If you don't have a system in place, we're going to create it. So go ahead and do your budget and say, okay, I'm going to start here. I got, X amount of dollars in. I spent X amount of dollars. Part of that line item, though, when you're looking at it, the money in less the money out, hopefully there's a little left over at the bottom. But when you're doing your budget, I'm going to encourage you to follow Dave Ramsey's suggestions and do a zero-based budget, which means there's a few extra line items there called emergency fund, savings, fund money, all those other little things that you want to do. You actually plan every single dollar that comes into your bank account so that you have told those dollars where they're going to go. So you can use an envelope system. You can use different things. You can use different accounts, whatever it needs to have happen. But you are allocating or basically moving money into certain quote unquote envelopes. Shall we use them? So that you actually know. So when you go groceries, you take a grocery envelope with you. Now, the cool thing about cash, if you get some cash in there, guess what? When you get up to the register, you only get to spend what's in that envelope. You really don't have a whole lot of choice in the matter. And that's what a budget's going to help you to do. It's going to help you figure out exactly how much money do you have for groceries? How much money do you have to go out and get a movie? Maybe go out for dinner. I don't know. Kind of depends. But when you start allocating and taking the time to figure out what's going on, and you can't do it unless you've put that foundation in place. You've got that weekly and monthly meeting schedules. You are tracking everything. You are getting some reports. Now you can actually plan and create a budget so that you know exactly where your money's going because you told it where it's going to go. You don't have to wonder where it went. So when those crazy things come up and life comes out and craziness happens, I kind of roll back into this quote, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the thing that I can and the wisdom to know the difference. Let's think about it. I'm not sure about you, but you have a little choice. There's part a couple more of my family members. He is really adorable. He's really cute. He's sitting on bears, just really happy. If anybody's had a puppy, they're cute. But all too often, as he comes barking through the house, he's like, a bull in a china shop, and everything in his way has just gotten knocked over. How often does that happen? And just shame, basic life. You got that brand new puppy coming over. He's so excited. The only problem is the lamp got knocked off the stand on the way by to come greet you because he's just so happy you have made it home. Are you going to react and flip out and spaz out? Or can you respond? Can you take yourself in a deep breath? Realize that he's really, really happy to see you. And next time he's going in a cage until you're ready to get him. And just have to deal with things. The same thing happens when it comes to your money. Unexpected things are going to happen. Unexpected chaos is going to be there. Are you going to react and go stressed out and frustrated and angry and quick to just completely react? Or can you take a step back because you have taken the time to plan so that you can respond? Even better yet, we've sent him to puppy school so that maybe he starts responding to us as well. We're instilling good habits. That's what I want to encourage you to do as well. Instill those good habits and go from there. So, as I said, that's kind of what the whole book is all about, kind of looking for there. So I want to encourage you, take the time, figure it out, and set your plan up. I even taught Bear how to read. Not quite sure he could get it, but you know what? We had fun trying. And that's the most important thing. Don't make it so frustrated that you don't know. Have some fun with it. Enjoy it, carry on a little bit. And you know what? You can actually make good strides forward, and you can actually hit the bullseyes when it comes to manage your money. Thank you so much. And I think I left a little time for, some comments and questions. Anything that you can have there that would work, or you have questions, comments, anything of that nature. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the share and pop over here. So, Sharia, comments. Kate, comments.
I don't have any questions, but I did want to say thank you. I felt like this was very useful. And I felt like you provided alternatives that I don't think most people think of, like the envelopes or using different ways to track and having the meeting with yourself. I think those are all very good suggestions.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you very much. I concur. I think that you gave great options for people and definitely will be useful for our clientele. So looking forward to sharing it with them.
Absolutely. I said, have some fun with it. It shouldn't be that stressful, even though numbers often are. And that's okay, because there are simple solutions. And that was a lot of where it was coming from. And, I kind of mentioned that Hammy has a mission, and he's there to help you turn your Hamiltons into Benjamins. So if you kind of think about that, that's his mission. So he's been working on helping people to do that. And he may have some different coats coming here in the near future too. So instead of just having the blue coat. So have some fun with it. So there may be extra little Hammies running around, or Hammy Juniors running around.
Oh my.
Bear may be having a good time between him and Winston. They may be, using him as soccer balls. Who knows?
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I genuinely appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Sharia, for coming and joining us and participating.
Hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
You too. Take care, everyone.
Bye.